friends, I'm back to compare the two versions of the Three Little Pigs with you. So to do that, we are going to use a Venn diagram. Some of you might have used this before. It looks like this. It's two circles, and one side is going to be dedicated to the original version of the Three Little Pigs. The other side will be dedicated to the true story of the Three Little Pigs, or the wolf's version of the story. So what happens with the Venn diagram is that one circle, everything in that circle applies to the first category. And the same thing goes for the other circle. And where they overlap is things that apply to both categories. So for our purposes, we're going to use this section right here is going to be for things that happened in or relate to the original version of the Three Little Pigs and not the wolf's version. I know. Same thing for the red circle. This section, Nala is pointing out for us, this section is just for the true story of the Three Little Pigs. And those are things that are not true for this section. So these show, these are separate, these are where we're going to put our things that we're going to call different. And this section is where they're the same, things that we write that apply to both. So that will be our similarities area. So I think that will start making more sense as we start talking about, when we start filling it out. So I'm going to do a demonstration. I'm going to fill out an example, and then it will be your turn to use this story sheet that I sent home with you guys in your home learning packet. Yes, Nala. And then you'll get to do your own. But first, I'm gonna do a little example. So I'm gonna start to think about how these two books, these two versions of the traditional story of the Three Little Pigs, how they were the same and how they were different. I'm going to try to use my reader's tools, characters, plot, and point of view to help explain my thinking. So let's start with something that was similar, that would go in this same section right here. Let's put on our thinking cap and do a thinking moment. I know. I think I would like to put down that in both versions of the story, the wolf caused the first little pig's house to fall down. So I'm gonna put that in the same section. I'm going to draw and write this. I'm going to try to draw it, and I will try to write it. Let's see what happens. This is gonna be my wolf. And then, let's see. My dog is making some noise over there, I'm sorry. Can you see that on the video? The yellow is difficult to see. I will give you a close-up afterwards to make sure that you know what it looks like. Okay, so I wrote, wolf causes pig number one's house to fall down, because that's true in both versions of the story. But now let's think about, how does that happen in the original version of the Three Little Pigs. What does he do? On purpose, he goes up to the house and says, little pig, let me in. And the pig says, no, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. And then the wolf says, well then I will blow your house down. And then he huffs and he puffs and then he blows the house down. So that is on purpose. So on this side, I wrote on purpose, puff and puff, and drew the wolf going. How does it happen in this version of the story? When we hear the wolf side of the story from his perspective or his point of view, how he says, yes, I caused the house to blow down, but it wasn't on purpose. It was an accident. I had a cold and I sneezed and the house just fell down. So I'm going to put accident on this side. So on this side I wrote accident, and then I drew him sneezing and wrote sneeze. So the last thing I want to do, last part of this example, is I would like to talk about what I've written here in terms of our reader's tools, character, plot, and point of view. So to do that, I'm going to bring this a little bit closer so that you can get a good look at it while we talk about it. So, what we wrote here about the house, the wolf causes the straw house to fall down. That is something that happened in the story. So that means that it is part of the plot. It is a plot point. The wolf huffing and puffing and the wolf sneezing, those are also plot points. But what tells us that in this version of the story, he huffed and puffed and blew the house down, and in this version of the story, he accidentally sneezed and blew the house down? That comes from who was telling us the story. That is the point of view. So when the wolf is telling the story, he says, hey, the original story, the narrator, because it wasn't a character telling us the story, it was a narrator, storyteller. When he's telling the story, the wolf, he says, hey, they got it wrong. I actually had a cold and I was sneezing and it was all a big misunderstanding. And yes, I did eat that pig. So really we could put the wolf eats pig in this section because it happens in both stories. I did eat the pig, but that doesn't make me bad. I'm a wolf, and wolves are natural predators, and pigs are part of our diet. We're supposed to eat pigs. So, in his story, an important part of the plot is added that says, I had a cold, and this was a mistake. It was an accident. And then that gives us information on the characters. So the same characters are involved here. There's a wolf in both stories, and there's also the pigs in both stories. But their characteristics or their personalities, who they are on the inside, that changes, right? And this side of the story goes, I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down, plot. And that shows us that he is a bad, evil character. He does some mean things in this version of the story. But in this version of the story, his actions, the plot, which is told to us through the point of view, shows us that he's misunderstood. He's not a bad guy. He was just had a cold. It was a misunderstanding. So in this version of the story, he is not bad or evil or mean. So now that we have used our tools of character, plot, and point of view to analyze these two versions of a well-known folk tale, The Three Little Pigs, with me as through an example, now I want to turn it over to you guys. It is your turn to fill out your Venn diagram. It looks like this. I sent them home. And you can draw or write to fill in the Venn diagram, and then you can share it on a Seesaw with me. Please do that so I can see your work and I can respond and we can have a conversation in the comments. If it helps you, you can add a video or voice recording to help explain your thinking. And I am looking forward to seeing and listening to your responses and replying back to you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon, KX.